There's something I've never told anyone. Not my parents, not my teachers, not even my best friend David, who once said he thought I was too quiet to get in trouble. I guess he meant it kindly, but he didn't know the kind of trouble I carried. Not the loud kind, the kind that lives in your chest like a secret drawer, one you never open in daylight. This story starts a few years ago, when I was 17. I lived in a small town where the streets rolled up early and the coffee always tasted like it had been sitting too long. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, but not your heart. I didn't think I had much of a story back then. I read a lot, stayed home, wrote in journals I never finished. I was quiet, careful. I moved through school like I was made of glass, not breakable, but invisible. I think I wanted it that way. Until James. He wasn't loud either, but he had a kind of weight to him. Like when he walked into a room, you could feel it shift a little. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He just was. The first time I saw him, I didn't even know his name. I only knew that something in me paused. Something in me looked closer. I'm not telling you this to be dramatic. I'm telling you because it was real. And for the longest time, I thought I'd imagined it all. That maybe I'd made up the way I felt just to feel something at all. But I didn't make him up. And I didn't imagine what happened between us. It was quiet, careful, like we were learning how to breathe the same air without making a sound. Sometimes I still wonder if he remembers it too. This is my story. I don't have photos. I don't have letters. But I have the way the light hit his jacket that first afternoon. I have the way his voice softened when he spoke to me. I have the way I felt when our hands almost touched and neither of us pulled away. I've carried this with me for years, and now I want to let it out. Not because I need anyone to fix it or understand it, but because I want to honor it. Even the quietest love deserves to be remembered. So if you're reading this, maybe lean in a little. This story doesn't shout, it whispers. And if you've ever loved someone in silence, maybe you'll hear your own heartbeat between the lines. The first time I noticed James, he was sitting alone by the window in the school library. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because the sky looked pale and tired, like it hadn't decided whether to rain or not. He was leaning back in the chair, not quite slouching, but not sitting up straight either. A paperback rested in his hands, his thumbs gently tucked between the pages like he'd been holding that position for a while. His coat, navy blue and a little worn, was draped across the back of the chair, and the collar of his shirt was slightly crooked. I don't know why I looked twice. Maybe it was the way the light hit the side of his face, making his lashes glow gold for a second. Or maybe it was the stillness of him. Everyone else in that library seemed to be buzzing with quiet noise. Pages turning, pencils scratching, chairs creaking. But James was completely still. I had never seen him before. That was rare in our town. New kids didn't come often, and when they didn't stay. But there he was, like he had always belonged to that window and that light and that book in his hands. I watched him from the next aisle over, pretending to browse through a section on American history. I wasn't even reading the titles. I was just listening. Not to him, he wasn't making a sound, but to how I felt. It was strange. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel excited. I felt quiet, like something in me had gone still too. He turned the page slowly, like he wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. When the bell rang for the next period, he didn't move right away. He closed the book carefully, tucked it under his arm, and stood with a kind of softness that made me wonder if he always moved like that, or if the library made him quieter too. He walked past me, and for a second, our eyes met. Not long, just a glance, but in that second, I saw something in his eyes I didn't expect. Recognition. Not like he knew who I was, but like he saw something in me he understood, maybe something he had felt before. Then he looked away, and I stood there, heart ticking a little faster than before, pretending to read about the Boston Tea Party. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I didn't even know his name, yet. But I kept seeing the way he sat, the way the light played on his jacket, the way his fingers moved across the pages, the way he didn't seem afraid to be alone. There was something about that that made me feel less lonely too. The next day, I went back to the library at the same time, pretending to look for a new book. I didn't expect to see him again, but I did. Same chair, same light, same stillness. And just like before, he looked up for a second. Our eyes met. This time, he gave the smallest smile. Not a full one, just the kind that barely moves your lips, but still changes your whole face. I looked away quickly, pretending to cough or something, but my chest felt warmer than it had the day before. After that, I kept noticing him. In the halls, at lunch, in the library again. He was always alone, but never in a sad way. Just peaceful, like he had learned how to carry his own quiet with pride. I didn't know it yet, but that boy by the window, he was going to change me. Not in a big, loud way, but in small, soft ways I wouldn't even see coming. It happened on a Monday. The sky was grey again, the kind that made everything look a little dull and slow. I was walking into the library, like I usually did after lunch, just to escape the noise of the cafeteria. I wasn't planning anything. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted a little quiet. I turned into the fiction aisle near the windows. It was my favourite spot. The sun always hit the shelves just right, making the spines glow like old treasures. And there he was, James, standing at the far end, head tilted, reading the back of a book. I stopped walking for a second. Not because I was surprised, but because something about him always made me slow down. Like I didn't want to disturb the moment he was in. I walked toward the shelf, pretending to scan the titles. My hand hovered near a copy of Mice and Men, a book I'd already read twice, when his hand reached out at the same time. Our fingers brushed. I pulled my hand back too fast, like I'd touched something hot. He did the same. We both looked at each other, eyes wide for half a second, and then we laughed. It wasn't loud, just a short, surprised laugh from both of us, the kind you let slip before you can stop it. "Sorry," I said quickly, stepping back. "It's okay," he replied. "You can take it." "No, it's fine. I've read it already," I said, shaking my head. He looked at the book in his hand, then smiled. "Me too. 3 times, actually." "Really?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "I guess I like sad endings." I don't know why, but that made me smile. Something about the way he said it felt honest, not in a dramatic way, just simple and true. "I do too," I said. "I mean, not always, but sometimes." He looked at me for a second. "You come here a lot." I blinked. "I guess so. I've seen you," he said, then paused. "You always sit by the big window." My heart did something strange then. It felt like someone had opened a small door in my chest, just a crack, just enough light to slip in. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's my favourite spot." He nodded. "Mine too." And that was it. Nothing big. Just that. But we stood there for a moment longer, not rushing to leave. "What else do you read?" he asked, turning the book over in his hands. I shrugged. "A little of everything. Mostly stuff that makes me feel something, I guess." "Same," he said. "Books that make you stop for a second. Think about things differently." I nodded. It was the kind of conversation I'd had before, talking about books, favourite authors, but it didn't feel the same. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not like I was someone to impress, but someone to understand. "James," he said suddenly, holding out his hand. "What?" I asked, confused. "My name," he said. "James." I stared at his hand for a moment before I reached out and shook it. "I'm Eli," I said. He smiled. "Nice to meet you, Eli." And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like the world stopped spinning or fireworks went off. But something, Inside me leaned forward. Not my body, but something deeper, a part of me that had been quiet for a long time. We talked for a few more minutes, about books mostly. He liked stories with flawed characters. I liked stories that lingered after the last page. The bell rang before I realized how fast time had moved. "I'll see you around?" he asked, tilting his head a little. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, sure." He walked off, hands in his pockets, and I stood there for a second longer, heart a little lighter than before. That night, I thought about our conversation, about the way his voice sounded when he said my name, about the way his eyes didn't look away when I spoke. It wasn't much, just small words between shelves, but for me, it was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. After that day, we started seeing each other in the library more often, not by accident anymore. It was like an unspoken plan. We'd both show up after lunch, drift toward the same section, and sit near the window like we always had. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat there, both of us reading our own books. But even in silence, it felt like we were sharing something. The space between us grew more familiar, less careful. He had this habit of reading with one knee pulled up onto the chair, foot tucked beneath his leg. And when something in the book made him smile, he'd tap the page lightly with his finger, like he was holding a secret there. I started bringing books I thought he might like. I'd leave them on the table between us, not saying much. He'd glance at the cover, then give a small nod, and the next day he'd tell me what he thought. "This one made me feel cold," he said once, about a story set in winter. Not in a bad way, just lonely cold. I knew what he meant. We laughed more too, quietly, like the library was still a church we didn't want to disrespect. He had a dry kind of humor, gentle but sharp if you listened closely. I liked it. I liked the way it made me look up from my book and forget to pretend I was reading. One afternoon, he told me he used to live near the ocean, said he missed the sound of it. "I'd fall asleep to the waves," he said, voice soft. "Now it's just wind and old pipes in the wall." I didn't say much, just listened. Sometimes I think that's what he liked most about me. I didn't push him to explain everything. He looked out the window for a long time that day. The sun was low, throwing gold light across the wooden table. I could see a little scar near his temple, just under his hairline. I'd never noticed it before. "You ever want to leave?" he asked suddenly. I looked at him. "This town?" He nodded. "All the time," I said, "but I don't think I'm brave enough." He smiled a little. "Maybe not yet." That "yet" stayed with me. We didn't talk about things like school dances or girls in our classes. I noticed that. Other boys always talked like that, loud and rough. But with James, the silences mattered more than the words. One day, he handed me a folded piece of paper, no explanation. I opened it at home. It was a poem, not by anyone famous, just something he'd written. It was short, only 8 lines, but it made my throat feel tight. It was about sitting in the quiet with someone and not needing anything else. I didn't say anything the next day. I just looked at him and nodded once. He nodded back, and that was enough. We were building something, slow and careful. Not with big moments, but with tiny ones. The brush of elbows as we sat too close on the bench. The way his foot would tap mine under the table. The way we both smiled when the other laughed. I didn't know what it meant yet. I didn't know what we were becoming. But I knew it felt like something real. And I wanted it to last. It was late October when James offered me a cigarette. We were standing outside the school building after last period. The air had turned colder, the kind that made your breath visible in short white clouds. Most of the students had already gone, home. The buses were gone, and the parking lot was quiet. He pulled the pack from his coat pocket and held it out to me. "I don't smoke," I said. He smiled, not looking surprised. "Didn't think you did." He lit one for himself and sat down on the low brick wall by the sidewalk. I hesitated, then sat next to him. We didn't speak for a while. The smoke curled slowly around us, mixing with the sharp scent of cold leaves and distant wood fires. James leaned back, looking up at the grey sky. "Feels like snow," he said. "Not yet," I answered. "Still too early." He nodded, flicking some ash to the side. His shoulder was close to mine. We weren't touching, but I could feel the warmth of him through the layers of my coat. A wind passed through the trees, making the last few leaves rattle and fall. One landed on the edge of his shoe. He stared at it for a moment before brushing it off. "I used to do this with my brother," he said suddenly. "Smoke after school, before everything changed." I turned slightly toward him. "What happened?" He shrugged. "He got sent away. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask why. The way he said it told me not to." "I'm sorry," I said instead. He didn't answer, but he glanced at me, his eyes softer than I'd seen them before. "You don't have to say sorry for things you didn't do." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was just there, like a quiet room between us. I could hear the distant hum of a car engine, the wind scraping against the flagpole, the soft sound of James breathing. He offered the cigarette to me again. I shook my head. "Still no?" He chuckled, just once. "You're stubborn. You're patient," I said. He looked over at me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Not in a dramatic way, just looking, seeing. His fingers, holding the cigarette, brushed the edge of mine. Not by mistake. He didn't pull away. Neither did. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if he meant anything by it, but my heart thudded hard in my chest, and the tips of my fingers felt like they were waking up from sleep. "I like sitting with you," he said after a while. "I like it too." Another long pause. Then he dropped the cigarette, stepped on it, and stood up. "We should get going," he said, voice quieter than before. I stood too, brushing my hands on my coat. We started walking toward the street, our footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. He didn't say much after that, and neither did I. But something had shifted. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I kept thinking about the way our fingers had touched, not really holding, not quite reaching, just almost. I kept hearing his voice in my head. "I like sitting with you." I whispered the words into the darkness, just to see how they felt in my mouth. And then I smiled, because I liked sitting with him too, maybe more than I was ready to admit. Some things live in silence. They sit just under the surface, like stones at the bottom of a still lake. You know they're there. You feel their weight, but you don't touch them. You don't speak them. That's how my feelings felt. Not loud, not wild, just quiet. Always there. I couldn't name it. I couldn't even say the word to myself, but I knew something had changed. It wasn't just friendship. It wasn't just liking the same books or laughing at the same jokes. It was the way my chest felt warmer when he was near. The way my hands remembered the feeling of almost touching his. The way I looked for him in every room without even thinking. No one ever talked about boys liking boys in our town. It wasn't just rare. It was invisible. Like it didn't exist, or wasn't allowed to. Sometimes I would hear whispers, jokes told behind hands, laughter too sharp, too cruel, the kind that made people disappear from rooms and never come back the same. I knew what could happen if you were different. I'd seen it, so I kept it in. I practiced silence like it was a second language. I smiled when people talked about girls. I nodded when someone mentioned a crush. I pretended, because pretending felt safer. But then James came along, and something in me wanted to stop pretending. I would lie in bed at night and think about the way he said my name, so simple, so soft, or how he sat beside me in the library, close enough that our sleeves sometimes touched. I'd imagine reaching out, just lightly, just enough to let him know. But I never did. I was afraid. Not of him, never of him, but of what it would mean, of what it would cost. Would he look at me differently? Would he stop sitting beside me? Would he laugh that sharp laugh I'd heard from other boys? I didn't think he would, but I wasn't sure, and the not knowing, that was the hardest part. There were moments I wanted to tell him, like the time we shared a piece of chocolate he had in his coat pocket. He broke it in half without a word and gave me the bigger piece. Our fingers touched for half a second, and I looked at him like maybe I could say something just then, but I didn't. There was also the time we were walking down the alley behind the library, and it started snowing. Light flakes, barely sticking. He held out his hand to catch one. It melted right away. He turned to me, smiling. Guess they don't last. And I wanted to say, maybe some things do. But I didn't say that either. Instead, I smiled back and looked away. I kept the words inside. Some nights I wrote things down. Little pieces of thoughts, lines I couldn't say out loud. I kept them folded in a small box under my bed. Some were poems. Some were just single sentences. He looked at me like I mattered. I don't know what this feeling is, but I want more of it. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just quiet. Those words helped, a little. They reminded me I wasn't alone. Not completely, because even if I couldn't speak them, the feelings were real. And real things don't vanish just because you hide them. They wait, they stay. Sometimes they even grow. It started raining right after the last bell. Not a drizzle, not a light mist. Real rain, cold and sudden. Like the sky had been holding its breath all day and finally let go. I didn't have a jacket, just my sweater. I pulled it tighter as I stepped outside, books clutched to my chest. James was already there, standing under the awning by the school steps. His hair was a little damp, his sleeves pushed up. He grinned when he saw me. "No umbrella?" he asked. "Nope." Me neither. We stood there together, watching the rain fall in thick lines onto the pavement. The street was empty, the usual noise of students and cars already faded. All that remained was the soft sound of water hitting the ground and the distant clap of thunder. James looked over. "Want to run for it?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where?" He pointed down the street. "There's an old bakery a few blocks away. Closed down, but the awning still works. We'll stay dry there." I hesitated, then nodded. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said. "But go anyway." He laughed, and we took off into the rain. The water soaked through my sweater in seconds. My shoes slapped against the sidewalk, each step loud and wet. James ran just ahead of me, glancing back every few seconds with that crooked smile. By the time we reached the bakery, we were both soaked. We ducked under the faded green awning, laughing, out of breath. Water dripped from our hair and sleeves. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. James shook his head like a dog, sending droplets everywhere. "Hey," I said, laughing. He shrugged, grinning. "You were already wet." I leaned back against the brick wall, trying to catch my breath. The rain was still falling hard, bouncing off the sidewalk in wild little splashes. James sat down on the ground, pulling his knees up. I joined him, our shoulders barely touching. For a long time, we didn't say anything, just listened. The rain had a rhythm to it. Steady, soft, like a lullaby. The street in front of us was quiet. No cars, no voices. Just grey skies, puddles, and the smell of wet earth. James reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of gum. He held one out to me. I took it with a nod. We chewed in silence. Then he looked at me. "You ever wonder if this is what life's supposed to be?" he asked. I frowned a little. "What do you mean?" "This. Sitting in the rain with someone you don't have to explain yourself to." I felt something flutter in my chest. "I do," I said quietly. "I wonder all the time." He turned away, looked out at the street again. The rain was slowing, just a little. I could see a drop sliding down his cheek, but I wasn't sure if it was rain or something else. Without thinking, I reached up and wiped it away with my sleeve. His eyes met mine. We didn't look away. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, heavy with something I didn't have words for. He reached out slowly and touched my hand. Not a grab, not a hold, just his fingers brushing the back of mine, soft, careful, like he was waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. I stayed still, letting the warmth of his skin sink into mine, letting that tiny touch say all the things we didn't know how to say. The rain kept falling, softer now, like the sky was tired. James smiled, just barely. "I'm glad you ran with me." "I'd do it again," I whispered. He looked down, then back up. "Yeah?" "Yeah." We didn't kiss. Not then. But something passed between us in that moment. Something quiet and honest. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was real, and it stayed with me long after the rain stopped. After the rain slowed, we started walking home together. The sidewalks were slick and shiny, reflecting the streetlights like mirrors. Our coats were damp, and steam rose from the warm air between us. James walked beside me, quiet, but not distant. I could feel the soft pressure of his steps matching mine. We passed under a big oak tree near the corner of Main Street. The branches were still dripping with raindrops, and the ground smelled of wet leaves. James stopped there, looking up at the tree, then back at me. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice low and careful. I swallowed hard. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "What is it?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I think I feel the same way you do." For a moment, I didn't move, didn't speak. My mind went quiet. His eyes were searching mine, hopeful but nervous. "I don't know how to say it better," he admitted. I smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread inside me. "You don't have to." He reached out, gently brushing a damp strand of hair from my forehead. His fingers were cool but tender. I looked down for a second, then back up. We stood there, close, under the tree. The night wrapped around us like a soft blanket. James leaned in slowly. I held my breath. His lips touched mine, brief and shy, not hurried, not loud, just a soft press, like a question and an answer all at once. It wasn't like in the movies, it was quieter, more honest. When he pulled back, his eyes met mine again. A small smile played on his lips, like relief and joy mixed together. I smiled too, feeling tears I didn't expect. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he said, softly. "Me too," I whispered. We stayed under the tree a moment longer, hands brushing, but not quite holding. The world felt still, like time had paused just for us. Then we started walking again. Our steps were lighter now, filled with something new, something fragile, something real. And though the night was dark and the streets were empty, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Like, maybe finally I had found a place where I belonged. After that night under the tree, things didn't change much on the outside. We still walked the same halls at school. We still shared books and quiet smiles in the library. But there was a new softness between us, like a secret only we shared. We didn't talk much about what happened. Neither of us needed to. Some days, I caught James looking at me, and I felt my cheeks warm. Other times, we would brush hands by accident in the hallway and hold the touch just a second longer before pulling away. I learned to listen to the silence between us. It said more than words ever could. Life kept moving. The seasons changed. The small town grew colder with winter's approach. James had to leave for the city that spring. His family moved away quietly, like a shadow slipping from the light. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. The last time we met, we sat on the bench by the river. The water moved slow and steady, just like our time together. He looked at me with that same quiet kindness and said, "I'll never forget you." I nodded, trying not to cry. "I won't forget you either." We didn't say more. We didn't need to. I kept the memory of his touch, his smile, and the rain that day. Those moments became part of me, soft, steady, and true. Sometimes, late at night, I would reach into the small box under my bed and pull out the notes I wrote, the poems, the thoughts I never spoke aloud. I'd read them and remember how it felt to be seen, to be understood, to be loved, even if just for a little while. Those are the things we keep, the quiet pieces of our hearts that never fade. And I carry them with me, always. Maybe you've felt it too, that quiet feeling that grows inside, the secret hope that something real might happen, even if it seems impossible. Maybe you've carried a love you couldn't say out loud, or a feeling so soft and deep that it feels like a secret song only you can hear. If you have, then you understand a little of what I know. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a glance across a crowded room, a hand brushing against yours by mistake, a smile that lasts a little longer than usual. It's the small things that matter most, the things that don't need words. I'm telling you this story not because it's grand or perfect, but because it's true, because love can live in the shadows, because sometimes the most real love is the one we keep hidden, tucked away in the quiet corners of our hearts. So if you're out there, feeling alone or afraid, remember you're not. You are seen, you are enough, and maybe, just maybe, one day you'll find someone who makes the rain feel warm and the silence feel full. Thank you for listening. If this story touched something inside, you maybe share it or think about someone who needs to hear it too, because love, even when quiet, deserves to be remembered.